Welcome to Talk to Brazil with Tom Reaoch, the business connector to business in Brazil. Welcome to Talk to Brazil, the Business Connection, the world's first English language internet radio program about business in Brazil, and now in podcast format. I'm Tom Reaoch, an American in Brazil for many years, and known as the King of Networking, a speaker and author on networking. A professional business network is made up of people we meet every day, personally or virtually. Our network grows and is sustained by maintaining contact with those connections. And podcasting is a modern form of networking. I'm talking from the city of Campinas, the state of Sâo Paulo, Brazil. So when you talk to Tom, you talk to Brazil and the world. Today's guest is Flavia Ribeiro de Souza. She's a Brazilian. Talking with us is her tonight from Sydney in New South Wales, Australia. Flavia is a lawyer and barrister of the Supreme Court of New South Wales, Australia, and she is also the founder of Oceania Legal and has gathered invaluable hands-on business and legal experience working in-house at some of the largest and highest performance Australian and overseas blue-chip companies. Flavia is also the Australian representative of the Brazilian Institute for the Development of International Business Relations, called IBREI, I-B-R-E-I, which is based in São Paulo, Brazil. And Flavia is a member of the Australia-Brazil Business Council, a large Australian not-for-profit business organization guiding those with commercial ties, investments, and interests between Australia and Brazil. So with that, Flavia, welcome to Talk to Brazil.
Thank you, Tom. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
And for our audience, we're talking, this is this morning in Campinas and this evening in Sydney, Australia. So thanks for sharing your evening with us.
My pleasure.
Flavia, as I mentioned before in our prep for the podcast, you have a vast experience. You've been in Australia for 18 years. You know the country, you know the economy, you know business, and you also know about the business relations between Brazil and Australia. What has the Council and the Brazilian Institute for Development, how does that help, and how is that working actually in Australia? Is there interest from the Australians for Brazil?
A lot of interest. Last night we had an amazing Brazil Showcase event organized by the Brazilian consulate in Sydney at the New South Wales Parliament in the Parliament House in Sydney. And it was an event where we had a number of leading Brazilian companies presenting to an audience of over 200 attendees at the Parliament House, a number of Australian politicians, members of the business community, local business community, international embassies, and also Brazilian community, and was really incredible. We had companies such as Balduco was present, Embraer, Millennium Bioenergy, which I'm a bit suspect talking about, passionate about. It's an ethanol plant with incredible technology that's coming out to Australia by invite of the Australian government. So there is definitely the interest between the two countries, and it's a growing interest as well. It's been going on for a number of decades. And it's just every year more is intensifying, and we could see this clearly from this event last night.
Great. But one thing I always say on the program, obviously business is between companies, but it's basically between people in companies. And
that's right.
It's also between people to people. So the essence of business is like what you just mentioned last night, is to get people together to talk about business. And that's the purpose of networking. And I've also seen you're very active in networking and networking groups in Australia.
Yes, I think my involvement with the networking it's a natural thing for me as a lawyer. You need to speak to people on your day-to-day
Right.
life. It's a profession where you have to communicate. But in terms when you have a business, you run a business yourself. You might even you don't need to necessarily be the owner of the business. But if you're employed by a company, if you want to go forward, if you want to expand the commercial activities of your segment, you can't do this by yourself or just sitting on your desk or just looking at a computer. You might just be doing that a lot through emails, but it becomes much less speedier if you don't engage with human beings.
Right.
And the funny thing is, you never know, like by just getting out of the office, talking to people, or get involved in associations, and a number of associations, not just necessarily the business specific for your industry, but you never know the people that you meet along the way,
Right.
the connections that you can make. So I always say that you should never underestimate the power of a connection or someone that you meet.
That's important. I'm going to write that down. Never underestimate the power of a connection. That's great.
Yes, because sometimes you think, oh, this person has nothing to do with my area or my line of work, or even you just met someone in a coffee shop. I think the networking is there every day. And people should develop the skills of networking by just having a genuine interest in conversing with others.
Right.
Because by having that initial step, having the conversation, and smiling or saying good eye in Australia, I think it's a bit more it's easier. It's a bit easier, this first contact. I noted when I first arrived here, people, they would look at my face and they smile at me. They would say good eye, and they wanted to talk to you. And Brazil,
how did you receive that? Because if you're walking down Avenida Paulista in São Paulo, and if you're walking in downtown Sydney, is it different for you?
It is different. It feels very different, Tom. I remember clearly noticing, I think people in Australia, they seem to be a little bit happier. I think that this expression on their face, they're a bit more open to talk to, just have chit chat, as we call it, conversation with a stranger. And even though they have, the English approach is a bit, of course, more reserved than when you talk about a Brazilian. Sometimes people just come to you and just give you a hug. It's one, but it's a different way. I noted here that the Australians, they love a conversation,
right?
And it's a very beautiful part of their culture that they actually they compliment you on the street. They say hello, good eye, and you can engage in conversation. And some people here, they really like to talk. So they can.
Well, talking's good. I like to talk.
That's what they're really good. They're storytellers. So they're not just like talking, but they like listening as well.
Right.
So in Brazil, it's a bit different because there's so many people, you just don't know. Firstly, people don't have much the time. You have to get in a public transport. You need to get to work and working long hours.
Right.
Not that you don't do this in here, but I think the rules in Brazil are a bit tighter, and the timing as well. Everything is far, and people, you don't know you can trust actually on the street. Someone is smiling at you and having a chit chat conversation. I think most of the people just run to the other end.
So you always have second thoughts here, right?
It's a bit of the suspicion, which is natural for sometimes, because in big cities, big places, large populations. But I note that Australians are very much easy to engage in conversation.
Well, I find that interesting. That's one of the reasons I hooked up with you and I wanted you to help our audience understand. And that's a global audience. They're not necessarily Brazilians, because business women, obviously part of business success is what you just said, connecting to people. You have to go out and respond to a smile or to a handshake or whatever, and being willing to engage, right?
Yes.
So how was that for you from a business sense? Because you also started your own company, right?
I did, yeah. Just
so one thing is positioning yourself as a professional person. The other is taking your business to market.
Exactly. I think my networking skills became to improve or just speedier as I started looking outside the employment. For a long time, I was an employee, so
right.
I wasn't very much. It wasn't a priority to get out there and talk to a vast number of people.
Mm-hmm.
But as you start maturing as well, and your interests become a bit more, how to say this, broader in speaking to other professionals, how do they live and how they getting through the goals, the things they want to achieve, you have to get up there and start talking to others.
Right.
And I think this intensifies it's natural when you're running your own business, because I think naturally you become more interested about conversation because you want to talk about your business, you want to talk about others, if they are in a similar situation as yours, their experiences, or even learning from your mentors, from your colleagues, and not just professional colleagues, but even your friends. They always have something it can be useful for you as a human being as well, because it's part of the process of evolving in the business community. You evolving as a professional, and if you have a business as well. Like I founded Oceania Legal about a year ago on the 1st of October.
So we're coming to a birthday.
Yes, how special.
Great.
Happy birthday to us.
Happy birthday to you. That's good.
Yes. And it is something that I've been thinking about, pondering, noting that how much the business also expanded me. I feel like even a happier person because I feel more motivated to get out there and engage more. I always did that because I always liked people, always being social.
Right.
And I have interest in different cultures, people from different countries, different professions. I'm a very curious person. I'm very curious. So, but now with the business, I noticed how good is this? It's doing to me, not just professionally, but also personally.
Well, that's important. You mentioned the different persons. Several weeks ago, I interviewed Claudia, who is also a member of one of your networking groups, and also a Brazilian group of professionals in Australia, in Sydney specifically. And what he mentioned, and I guess you know that well, he said, Australia is a melting pot of so many different types of people. It's highly diverse.
It is.
So there are Australians, but he says there's everybody there. And it's very easy to meet and do business with people.
It is because, and I find this fascinating, Tom, because in Brazil and Australia are very similar in this sense. I always say this because Brazil was a colony 500 years ago and then received a large number of immigrants.
Right.
So 500 years later, in Brazil, everyone is Brazilian, everyone is already mixed. Mm-hmm. But Australia is going through this process that Brazil went through 200 years ago, right now. And I feel very blessed and sometimes fortunate, so that I've been put, by whatever reasons, the God or my profession brought me to Australia, and I'm right now part of this process where I can see how a society it changes and how it's changing, evolving and mixing and adapting itself because of the receiving so many immigrants, different cultures, and it's all happening now in Australia. And because we have so many of this, the immigrants, a lot of the people, some of them come in different situations as refugees, but others come as students or they come for business.
Right.
And so everyone's really open to engage with each other and to learn. Mm-hmm. And it becomes a very, very, I don't know, at least for me, I've always been really interested in the foreign, what things that are alien, in the alien. It is fascinating for me. And I believe for a lot of the people that are living here too.
Well, you have an exciting skill set. Obviously, your networking aspect and skills are fundamental in any business. But from a technical side, you also are I'll use the word registered lawyer following the state of Sâo Paulo in Brazilian law, and you're able to practice. And you're registered in New South Wales, and you understand Australian law and practice there. And many people think law is law, but as we spoke, and sometimes we see in business, law is different depending on where you are.
Exactly. Yeah. I would say that I have the license to practice law in Brazil. I went through the 5 years of university in São Paulo, where I'm from. Mm-hmm. And as you know, to become a lawyer is not enough just studying a few subjects.
Right.
It's very similar to medicine. You have the academic part and you have the practical part of the course. So I did that in Brazil, do the studies, I did the practice, and then you have to sit the board exam, the OAB.
The OAB, right?
The OAB, everyone struggles there in Brazil, but to pass, because you have to study again everything that you did before. And in Brazil, you also have to do practical legal training, so you can't practice on your own for a period of time.
Right.
And it's a journey. It's an ordeal.
It's a challenge.
It's a challenge. But I think in Brazil, the process to the practice of law is a bit faster. When you graduate in Brazil, you can just hit the ground running. A lot of young lawyers, they just start even their own practices, or they can get the training from in-house, from multinationals like I did. Mm-hmm. But in Australia, the process is similar. You also, to practice law in Australia, you have to be licensed by the Australian OAB, let's say, put this way. So you still have to go through the university as well. You have to go through 4 or 5 years of academics. Mm-hmm. And you have to have 2 years of practical legal training before you graduate and obtain your license. And after the license, you cannot still practice on your own for another 2 years.
Wow.
And it's a very slow induction into the profession here. I find this very different. That's one of the main differences that I noted, the induction into the profession in Australia. And I think this comes from the common law. It's a bit slower because it's more they try to be a bit more careful. Mm-hmm. And you go through lots of different layers until you can actually feel at least 5 or 6 years of practice after graduation. You feel that you can start doing things on your own.
I see.
It's a long way.
But you've gone the way and you're there. And now you have your company. And now we talked about this moment of business expansion, global economies, market 4.0, the interest in Brazil and Australia, Australia and Brazil. So you can legally handle issues on both sides of the coin.
Yes, I can. And I'm fascinated and daunted by the fact sometimes. Wow, this is incredible because I can tap into both jurisdictions. Mm-hmm. Of course, my practice, because I live in Australia, I have been here for the last 18 years. My daily practice is Australian law. Mm-hmm. And that's where I advise the most. But now Oceania Legal was born a multinational, as we say. Right. Because it's got its foot and the arms and legs in both continents.
And it's going to be a continued success now that you've come to another birthday, right?
Exactly. And our first anniversary, I'm so glad to share this with you.
Good.
So that's a couple of days,
So I also want to, before we close, I want, as we mentioned before, I want your networking tips for Brazilians. I want you to speak as a Brazilian to Brazilian businesswomen, because also Brazilian companies, Brazilian persons are going out into the world. What are your tips to Brazilian business women in a global market?
My tip is to continue being so brave, courageous, and resilient. This is how I perceive Brazilian women. I think they are really strong, naturally strong and brave women, and don't be afraid. We always get a bit self-conscious about speaking another language. It's natural, and most of the time, no one is actually judging you by the way you speak. It's more like a conversation inside your head. So first tip is to watch the conversation that's happening inside your head and get out of your head more than stay inside your head more.
That's another good quote. Get out of your head, right?
Get out of your head and start talking. Start talking. Don't think too much. Just start talking, start a conversation. If whatever you want to achieve outside Brazil, if you want to get an experience in different areas in a company, don't just go there. Just contact the company by telephone, send them an email, but I think the verbal contact is very important these days, because to send a resume and written communication, everyone gets so caught up in millions of emails every day.
Right.
That it's very important that you connect, and I think the best way to really connect, engage with another human being is by verbal communication. If you can't do that in person,
use, as you have done, and for our audience, Flavia and I actually connected through LinkedIn.
Yes,
years ago. That's how we connected.
It's an amazing platform for business, and I take it very seriously. My LinkedIn. I try to be very also selective. LinkedIn is not a social platform, social media platform, as you say. It's a professional platform. So I try
business, right.
It's business. So I try to really only have people there that are either my business partners or potential clients, or associates or mentors, or people from my professional past, present, or future.
Mm-hmm.
And really, when someone wants to connect with me, I always I have a little conversation on the messenger, like when they say, hello, you want to connect?
Right.
I want to know, oh, great. So I genuinely look at their background and try to relate.
Right.
See, how can we maybe one day, or just ask questions about their background, what they do.
Right.
Because that's how you add value to the network. There's no point you having 20,000 people on your LinkedIn if you don't know who they are, what they're doing.
That's true.
Isn't it? You need to know your mob. Get to know your mob.
And you need to interact with your group. If you don't interact with connections, they're just there on a shelf, right?
Another tip that I actually just realized, that it's a simple realization. How easy it is for someone to start your own networking group.
Mm-hmm.
You think, how do you do this? You have this massive group. How do you start? It's so easy. The other day I said, well, I feel like after work, I felt like going out and having a drink, because I want to catch up with all these people, my friends and business. I said, how am I going to do to see everyone if you can't be in 1,000 places at the same time. So I just wrote an email to every single body.
Right.
Like did a group email and said, look, would love to see everyone. And there were people that didn't know each other. So it would be good how good would it be to see all these amazing people in the same room. And boom.
And boom.
Boom.
And
2 days later, we had 20 people sitting in a pub.
Right.
And I was very happy to see people that I, had conversations or engagements, connecting with each other.
Right.
And how easy it is to do that. It's just...
it's even easy virtually, as I mentioned. I interviewed the podcast for Claudio and the Brazilian group in Sydney. I actually found him through you. You had posted on LinkedIn an article, a post about the meeting that you had in Sydney with your group. And that popped
and Claudio
up.
was there.
And I connected, clicked to Claudio. Claudio accepted. We engaged, as you said, on the chat. So tell me a little bit more about your group. Then we had the podcast, and he told his story about the networking, told a similar story of every morning or several mornings a week going out and just sitting down and having coffee with his connections to get to meet them and learn better. And that's the process. Exactly.
And with the IBRE, like they are amazing. So they're an amazing not-for-profit organization that's based in São Paulo. The main objective of IBRE is to promote the Brazilian market, right? And to help expanding Brazil and Brazilian businesses globally. And when you're a part of an association like this, and it's very easy to just connect to them. Like if I need someone, do you know someone that can help me with this in terms of consultancy, information, not be afraid to ask questions. And they are an amazing group. That is association is growing exponentially, helping so much in Brazil with the growing internally, because they do a lot of information about what can Brazil can do to improve its competitiveness, which is a hot topic now for Brazil as well, as you can see.
Right.
Brazil wants to do business with other countries, right?
Right. And other countries want to do business with Brazil, but you have to find people who can make the fit.
Yes. And I think that your role, because you also live in Brazil, you're an American and you love this, is so important to the people that want to reach out. They know that there are people. I always say that I feel like I'm a conduit.
That's it. That's the word.
The conduit. Yeah. So they can flow through me, and I'm happy to, stretch my arms to Brazil, to Australia. What do you want? Both sides. We can more than happy to connect and link. And for women, I don't usually network thinking I'm a female. Like I'm a female, I'm going to network, and how to do myself as a female do things. I've never had this vision of myself. I'm focused on the task at hand,
right?
On the business, and I don't see gender when I'm talking to someone. So what information, what magic can come out of this conversation here?
So like you said, get out of your head, but also you need to get out of your body, right?
Yes, get out of your body, get out of your head, start talking. Start talking. Just talk.
Just talk.
Don't be there sitting down quiet, shaking, sweating in a corner. Just start talking.
That's important. Well,
Anything.
Flavia, I want to thank you. We're coming to the end of our time, but as you said, start talking, and Talk to Brazil is the place to talk to. So
yes,
I really enjoyed our conversation. Thank you for sharing your Friday evening with us.
Thank you so much,
the world. Tom. All right. And the two things that I won't forget is never underestimate the power of a connection. I think that's something that is powerful, because many times we do that. And this one of getting out of your head and start talking is a nugget. It really is. So, and that's
how
it.
Powerful is that?
That's the most powerful thing. Just get out of your head and start talking. So
start talking. Yes, whatever you're passionate about, just make conversation. Whatever comes in your, of course, within reason. But it doesn't.
That's true. Because I say when we're in business meetings or in these business environments, what have you, we are literally 20 to 40 centimeters from persons who know something that we don't, and the only way that you can find out what they know is asking, right?
Absolutely. And they might be thinking about the same thing.
And they probably are. And they're trying to get out of their own head. So
exactly. Get out of the head.
Flavia, thanks again. And again, congratulations and happy birthday, happy anniversary on your company. I'm sure it's going to be
Thank you so much.
success, and we're going to be back in the future to talk about other business opportunities between Brazil and Australia, okay?
I will love that. Thank you so much, Tom, and congratulations for your wonderful work that you're doing.
You.
It's very, very special.
Okay, and I appreciate that. I would also like to invite you and our guests to visit the website, talktobrazil.com. That's TALK, the number 2, BRAZIL.com, where you'll find today's interview with Flavia Ribeiro de Souza and links to her LinkedIn profile, as well as Oceania Legal website. You can also find this and our previous shows of Talk to Brazil on Spotify, Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, TuneIn, Himalaya, and many others. And thank you, our audience. Remind everyone that today's program was brought to us by Focus MI Market Intelligence, and Focus MI specializes in market research for the Brazilian agricultural market. More about them on their site, which is focusmi.com. Remember, when you talk to Tom, you talk to Brazil and the world. Goodbye, and thanks for listening. Thanks for listening to Tom Reaoch on Talk to Brazil, the business connector to Brazil.